Imagine smiling after a slap in the face, then think of doing it 24 hours a day. The book Thief by Markus Zusak is a powerful historical novel set in Nazi Germany during World War II. Death introduces himself as the narrator of this story. He explains that he has seen the book Thief, Liesel Meminger, 3 times. The first time was on a cold, white day on a train where tragedy struck. The second time was near a plane crash where a pilot died surrounded by the red of fire. The third time was during a bombing with black smoke filling the sky. These colors, white, red, and black, remind him of the Nazi flag, a grim symbol of the era. The story begins on a cold, snowy day. Everything was white. Liesel Meminger, a young girl, was traveling on a train with her mother and younger brother Werner. They were headed to Munich, but it wasn't a joyful trip. Her mother, poor and unwell, was taking them to a new town, Mulching, where Liesel would be placed into foster care. Times were hard in Nazi Germany, and this was the only choice they had left. But something terrible happened on that train. Werner, Liesel's little brother, didn't make it. He died suddenly right there on the train. Liesel was in shock, frozen by the loss. They had to stop the train in a small town to bury him. And that's when death saw her for the first time. The pain on her face, the grief, the confusion of a child who couldn't understand why death had taken her brother. At the gravesite, while they were burying Werner, something unusual happened. A gravedigger, careless in his work, dropped a book. The Gravedigger's Handbook. Liesel saw it lying in the snow. Even though she couldn't read, something drew her to it. She picked it up as if it was the only thing she had left to hold on to in that moment of loss. That book became her first act of thievery, but it wouldn't be her last. After the burial, Liesel and her mother continued their journey to Mulching, a trip filled with sadness and confusion. When she arrived at her new home, she wasn't exactly excited. She was being sent to live with foster parents Hans and Rosa Huberman. Rosa wasn't the kind of woman people gravitated towards. She was loud, rough, and strict, with a voice that carried the weight of every harsh word she spoke. Her constant yelling and name-calling made her someone you'd instinctively avoid. But Hans was different. While Rosa's sharpness filled the house, Hans brought a gentle presence. His calm, steady demeanor had a way of soothing those around him, and there was a quiet kindness that slowly drew Liesel in. His silver eyes held a softness, always hinting at a smile, even when his lips stayed still. Hans, a painter by trade, had a fondness for smoking, and it was through this habit that he and Liesel found their connection. He taught her how to roll his cigarettes, and during those quiet moments, sitting together, they began to talk. These small shared rituals became their special time. Every night, when Liesel was tormented by nightmares of her brother Werner's death on the train, she would wake up in a panic, drenched in sweat. But Hans was always there, comforting her in the stillness of the night. He would sit by her side, offering quiet reassurance, sometimes holding her, other times softly playing his accordion. These moments together deepened their bond, a silent promise that she wasn't alone in her grief. Liesel gradually adjusted to her new life with the Hubermans, though it wasn't easy. During the day, she began to explore her surroundings and met Rudy Steiner, a boy with a rebellious streak and an obsession with the American sprinter Jesse Owens. Daring and adventurous, Rudy often ran around pretending to be Jesse, even covering himself in charcoal to mimic the athlete's skin. This reckless act got him into trouble, but he shrugged it off with a carefree spirit. They quickly became close friends and partners in crime, with Rudy coaxing Liesel out of her shell as they got into mischief together. Despite Liesel's adjustment to her new life, there was a major issue: she didn't know how to read. One day, Hans found the book Liesel had stolen from the gravesite, the Gravedigger's Handbook. Instead of scolding her, he asked if she wanted to learn how to read it. That's how it all began. Night after night, they would sit in the basement under the flickering light, and Hans would teach her to read. They went over the letters, the words, the sentences. Liesel struggled at first, but she was determined. This act of reading felt like a new world opening up for her. As Liesel learned to read, words transformed into something much deeper than mere letters. They became her escape from the grim reality around her. The war, the oppression, and the loss faded into the background when she immersed herself in a book. Books became her refuge, a way to reclaim a sense of agency in a world that felt increasingly out of control. While Liesel discovered a new world in books, the reality around her grew increasingly dark. Germany sank deeper under Nazi rule, and the political climate in Mulching became more serious each day. The war escalated, leading to food rationing and dwindling job opportunities, leaving the town gripped by fear. As Hitler's influence spread, the Nazi propaganda machine worked tirelessly to ensure his message reached every aspect of life, actively seeking to destroy anything that contradicted it. One day, the town held an event to celebrate Hitler's birthday, but it was not a typical celebration. Instead, it turned into a book burning, where many books deemed un-German or dangerous to the Nazis were thrown into the flames. For Liesel, watching so many books being destroyed was terrifying, but it also ignited a strong sense of defiance within her. After the crowd left, Liesel felt a strong urge to do something. Quietly, she approached the still burning pile and grabbed a book from the flames. This was a risky act of rebellion, but for Liesel, it was a way to push back against the world that had taken her brother and threatened her new family. By saving that book, she wasn't just rescuing words, she was asserting her right to read, to learn, and to stand against a regime that wanted to silence her. In that moment, she became a fighter for freedom and knowledge. Liesel began delivering laundry for Rosa, and one of her customers was the mayor's wife, Ilse Hermann. One day, Liesel received an unexpected invitation into Ilse's study. As she stepped inside, she was immediately captivated by the sight of walls lined with books, each one a portal to another world. Frau Hermann welcomed Liesel warmly, encouraging her to explore the shelves and immerse herself in the stories. This was a rare opportunity for Liesel, who had longed for access to literature. Meanwhile, the story takes us to Stuttgart, where Max, a Jewish man, hid in a cramped closet without food, light, or water. His only connection to the outside world was a friend who brought him false identity papers and a map hidden inside Mein Kampf, Hitler's autobiography. With these, Max left his hiding place and took the train to the Huberman's house. It was revealed that Hans Huberman had served with Max's father in World War I. After Max's father died, Hans promised Max's mother that he would always help her family. When Max finally arrived in Mulching, Hans and Rosa took him in and hid him in their basement to keep him safe from danger. As Max recovered from his ordeal, he formed a close friendship with Liesel. To connect with her, he began writing a book for Liesel using the painted-over pages of Mein Kampf as his canvas. Through their shared love of stories, they created a special world for each other, finding comfort and hope amid the chaos outside. Their bond grew stronger as they spent time together, sharing laughter and dreams. Max's writing not only helped him express his feelings, but also encouraged Liesel to embrace her love for words. Together, they built a refuge filled with creativity and friendship, reminding each other that even in difficult times, hope could still shine through. The tension rises when Frau Hermann informs Liesel that they can no longer afford to send out the laundry. This news deeply angers Liesel. She feels frustrated knowing her family is already struggling. In her anger, Liesel, with Rudy's help, starts sneaking into the Hermann's library to steal books. For her, this act becomes a way to escape her reality and feed her growing love for stories, giving her a sense of control in a world that feels increasingly out of her hands. For Christmas, Liesel builds a snowman for Max in the basement, hoping to bring him some joy. However, when Max falls ill and slips into a coma, Hans and Rosa begin to worry about what they will do if he dies in their home. They fear the consequences and think about how to handle the situation. After months, Max starts to recover. Just as things seem to improve, Nazi soldiers arrive to inspect the basement to see if it can serve as a bomb shelter. Fortunately, they don't discover Max, keeping him safe for the time being. Liesel continues sneaking books from the Hermann's library, but eventually, Frau Hermann notices. She leaves Liesel a dictionary and thesaurus with a note acknowledging that she knows Liesel has been taking the books. This surprises Liesel, but also encourages her to keep reading. At a Hitler Youth Carnival, Rudy wins 3 races, bringing some much-needed joy to everyone. However, when the Allies begin bombing near Mulching, the people on Liesel's block must take shelter in a neighbor's basement. During the air raids, Liesel reads to the others, helping to keep them calm until it's safe to go outside. While Liesel comforts everyone with her stories, Max remains alone in the Huberman's basement, hidden away from the dangers outside. His time alone is challenging, but the love from Liesel and the Hubermans helps him stay strong. As the war intensifies, Nazi soldiers begin parading Jewish prisoners through town on their way to the concentration camp at Dachau. One day, Hans sees an old man struggling to keep up with the group and feels compelled to help. He gives the man a piece of bread, but Nazi soldiers notice and punish both Hans and the man by whipping them. This act of kindness draws unwanted attention to Hans, making him realize that Max is no longer safe in their basement. That night, Hans helps Max leave their home to protect him. Hans waits anxiously, expecting soldiers to come and arrest him as punishment. However, instead of coming for him, they visit Rudy's house to recruit him for a school designed to train future Nazi leaders. Rudy's father, Alex, bravely refuses to let his son go, standing up to the soldiers. Although they leave for the moment, a few days later, both Alex and Hans are drafted into the German army. With both fathers gone, Rudy and Liesel decide to take action during the next parade of Jewish prisoners. They scatter bread in the streets, showing their support and defiance against the regime. Later, Rosa gives Liesel a special book that Max made for her called The Word Shaker. It tells the story of Max and Liesel's friendship and holds the promise that they will be reunited one day. This gift strengthens Liesel's resolve and keeps hope alive in their hearts, even as the darkness of the war surrounds them. Hans is sent to Essen, where he joins a squad responsible for cleaning up after air raids. One member of the squad dislikes Hans and insists they switch places on the work bus one day. Tragically, the bus crashes, killing the other man, while Hans escapes with only a broken leg. This injury sends Hans home to recover. Meanwhile, after another air raid, Liesel and Rudy come across an Allied fighter pilot whose plane has crashed. They arrive just in time to witness him die. This is the second time Liesel encounters Death, who comes to collect the pilot's soul. As the Nazis continue parading Jewish prisoners through Mulching, Liesel is devastated to see Max among them. Heartbroken, she finally confides in Rudy about hiding Max, a secret she had kept to herself until that moment. Liesel receives a blank notebook from the mayor's wife, inspiring her to begin writing her own story. One night, while she is in the basement editing her book, tragedy strikes as her neighborhood is bombed. Hans, Rosa, Rudy, and many others are killed in the attack. When rescue workers pull Liesel from the rubble, she finds Rudy's lifeless body. As the workers take her away, Liesel leaves behind her finished book, titled The Book Thief. Death, who has been watching over her, rescues the book. After the war, Liesel goes to live with the mayor and his wife. Eventually, Max returns to Mulching after the liberation of the concentration camps, and they share an emotional reunion, hugging and crying together, finally reunited after all the suffering they endured. Liesel grows up and moves to Australia, where she starts a family and lives a long, fulfilling life. When Death finally comes to take her soul, he presents her with the book she wrote many years ago, The Book Thief. It's a poignant reminder of the powerful stories she told and the deep connection she formed during one of the darkest times in history.